let's take this time now of 2013 spring to 2014 and analyze it a little further. In March of 2013, so we're only a couple months away from that, um, we're going to have a few things that are going to begin. We're going to have Mars in Aries, and we're going to have Jupiter in Gemini, and that's going to start energizing our lives earlier than usual, because usually things get energized more after springtime. But I think even earlier in our time, like the end of winter, we're going to find things are beginning to get more energized. And I always look at, when planets are moving, I always look at what they mean to the United States natal chart. The United States natal chart is July 4th, 1776. And when you take a look at that, at where the planets were on July 4th, 1776, you know what the United States natal chart is. So when planets keep moving, just like if they move and they have an effect on your natal chart, you'll know it's called a transit, and that's when things are going to happen in your life, when those planets make a geometrical pattern to the natal planets in your chart. Well, same thing with the United States chart or any country. That's the moment of its birth. And so that's who it is. And planets keep moving, of course, and those are transits, and the transits to those natal planets are what cause the big changes that happen in a country. So lots of changes coming up for America over this next year. The climax of it is going to be in the spring of 2014, because what's going to happen in the spring of 2014 is that the Uranus-Pluto square is going to be right to the sun of the United States. The sun of the United States in its natal chart is 13 degrees of Cancer. Uranus and Pluto will be at 13 degrees of Aries and 13 degrees of Capricorn. They'll be making a square and an opposition to the United States sun. At that same time, Mars and Jupiter will be in Libra and Cancer. That will form a really important astrological configuration called a Grand Cross. And that Grand Cross will be making an aspect to the very center of who the United States is. Remember, the sun in your chart, the sun in a nation's chart, is the very center of who they are. Just like the sun is the center of the solar system and all the planets revolve around it, so it's true metaphorically. So the very center of who the United States is, its very purpose, its identity, is going to be drastically transformed during that time period and preceding that time period. I believe it's going to be one of the biggest crises that we've seen in our lifetimes around the state of the United States, of its condition. And I believe that this is all in the context of the changing of ages again. So that means that the United States is going to have to transform itself in a way that it's more a part of this Aquarian age than it is a part of the Pisces age. Now remember that the Pisces age started when there was an empire, and now we end that age with another empire, and that empire is mainly led by the United States. Since Aquarius is about equality and the United States is a superpower, that means that the United States is going to have to become more an equal member of our world family in order for us to move into an Aquarian age. The Pisces age was about the one God. And of course, all sorts of religions think that they know that one God, the one nation. It's like the one all the time. The Aquarian age will be about the many, but the many all connected as one. So it's like diversity in unity is what the Aquarian age will be, but equality among all the members in diversity. So the United States is going to have to go through a huge transformation now over this next year, or year and a half, in order to become more of an equal member of our human family. And you know what exactly will happen? I just believe that the economy will be threatened much more than it is now, and I believe that conflicts will occur across the world that will start balancing out the power structure in our world. and that we as Americans need to get used to um, a certain kind of humility now. And I think it's nice to think of yourself as living in a great country, and we do. But to think that we're better than other countries and other peoples, that's what has to change. And it has to change inside of each one of us, too. So back to March. In March, with Jupiter in Gemini and Mars in Aries, um, and Uranus in Aries, too, it's going to mean that it's going to be the beginning of, I believe, more conflicts in the world. And then as the springtime happens, there's going to be 3 eclipses this spring. Usually there's 2 eclipses in a season, but this time there'll be 3. There'll be one on the 25th of April, one on, I believe, the 9th of May, and another one on the 25th of May. And then during that time period, the Uranus square Pluto will be exact again. So we'll have a very intense, a very powerful springtime with a lot of change in it. And then part of that springtime, Jupiter and Mars will be conjunct the United States Mars during that time period. So usually when you see that happen, that the United States Mars is being touched off, it means that things that have to do with the United States strength in the world, with its military, is being touched off. And so I imagine that there'll be some conflicts that the United States will be involved in, even more than we're involved in now. That'll be happening in the springtime. Then in the summer, things will continue to be quite hot as far as events and actions go in the world. And then in the autumn of 2014, another eclipse season. There'll be an eclipse at the end of October, and there'll be one on the 3rd of November, and the Uranus-Pluto will be right in there again. It'll be its next exact meeting will be on the 1st of November, just before that Scorpio new moon solar eclipse. That's what we had this last autumn, was a Scorpio new moon solar eclipse, and we're going to have another one. And those of you that remember back then, it was really a powerful time period. It's when Obama was about to be elected. You remember how intense that was getting between the different parties? And the Syria situation got really serious during that time period too. So this autumn is going to be a really powerful shift. Now I've got some concerns about that autumn. There's a lot of connections between President Obama and Abraham Lincoln. And just when you look at simply that Lincoln was around at the freeing of the slaves, and then Obama actually is the fruit of that work. He's the first African American to be president of the United States. Now there's a connection between Kennedy, Lincoln, and Obama that I see. President Lincoln was inaugurated in 1861. John Kennedy was inaugurated in 1961. President Obama was born in 1961. President Obama has been using the Lincoln Bible for his inauguration. He's the first president ever since Lincoln to use the Lincoln Bible for his inaugurations. And he quotes Lincoln all the time. And the week that he was elected the second time, President Obama, the Lincoln movie came out. So I see a lot of connections, perhaps a reincarnation, but I can't know that for sure. I just know that the connections are there between those two men. And when you throw Kennedy into the mix too, you see that Lincoln was the one who had the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves, and then Kennedy was the next president who was really important in civil rights. That's when the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King was around. That's what was happening at that time. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of connections between Kennedy and Lincoln, in that they both had vice president's named Johnson, who took over, and that President Kennedy's secretary was named Lincoln. President Lincoln's secretary was named Kennedy. And if you Google that, you'll find that there are all sorts of unbelievable connections between those two men. So now we throw President Obama into that mix too. And you got to say, so, I have a lot of concern that, of what might happen to President Obama, especially as we get into the autumn. By the way, this autumn also is the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John Kennedy. And the aspects this autumn, the two eclipses that are going to happen. The first eclipse is right on President Obama's Saturn. And the second eclipse is going to be square his sun, and Saturn will be a part of the eclipse. So it'll be a solar eclipse in Scorpio with Saturn in it, conjuncted, square to President Obama's sun. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. That's really powerful symbolism of stresses to his life at that time and possible danger to his life at that time. So when you look at the big picture, we're moving into this new age. And the Pisces age has been a lot about saviors and people sacrificing themselves for the betterment of others and sacrificing themselves with their lives. Whether you look at Lincoln or Kennedy or Christ or even other people like Martin Luther King, very important. John Lennon even, people that have fought for something greater than themselves, fought for a lot of principles that you could even consider, Aquarian age principles. And these men all sacrificed their lives, at least principles for the betterment of humanity. And so the Pisces age is about saviors, and it's about martyrs, and it's about looking for the one, whether that's a guru or whether that's a savior. The Aquarian age is about being in a group community and all of us sharing the responsibility of making this a better world, and not about anymore looking for the one or looking for the savior or looking for someone to change our world by themselves and through their death. So since President Obama is right in the transition, he's either going to be, in my estimation, the next person that's the last of the Pisces age that has to sacrifice themselves for humanity and moving into an Aquarian age, or we don't need it anymore. We're already crossing the threshold, and he will just help us and lead us into being this Aquarian age consciousness, and he doesn't have to sacrifice his life. So let's all pray and hope that that second scenario is the one that plays out. But it'll be an important shift now from 2013 spring to spring of 2014. And another thing that Obama and Lincoln have in common is a civil war. And you'll say, what do you mean? There certainly was a civil war in Lincoln's time. How about now? Well, if you take a look, there's kind of a cultural war that's going on, the red state, blue state kind of a thing. And it's been getting pretty ugly. And did you know that many people put in petitions for their states to secede from the Union after this second election for Obama? And did you know that now with the gun control issue, that there's a lot of people getting really, really angry on the wanting the guns side of things? So there's definitely a cultural war going on, and how big that becomes an actual civil war in our country. Not necessarily where we're fighting, but perhaps, but more about how we're splitting apart as a country because of this kind of like difference in cultural values that we have one from another. So you can see that kind of cultural civil war, you can see that maybe conflicts in the world, especially the Middle East, are going to be happening this next year. I think Syria is an important part of what's going to happen in the Middle East. Everyone has got putting their interest into it, whether it's Al Qaeda or the United States, Western powers, um, Sunni Muslims, Shiite Muslims. I mean, everybody's trying to have a stake in how Syria is going to turn out. And of course, Israel is very concerned too. And the Israeli-Palestinian issue is going to be an important issue as part of this shift in ages. In fact, if you look at the Middle East, you can see how important it is to our shifting of ages. Because in the Middle East is where the major religions had their beginning, whether it's Islam or Christianity or Judaism. And when you take a look at civilizations, the first civilizations that we have had, most of them have been in that same area, whether it's Egypt, Sumeria, Babylonia, they all began there. So as we shift ages, what happens in the Middle East is extremely important because we have such strong roots as a human family in that Middle East. And of course, one of the big issues of changing ages is between an old paradigm, which is about chance and randomness and one against another, one religion against the other religion, one nation against another nation, just a feeling of separation that's on this planet. And of course, in this new age, it's not about separation anymore, it's about connection. So on a personal level, as we go through this very important year from spring 2013 to spring 2014, the work that each one of us does on a consciousness level is extremely important now. So we've all been programmed to believe in that old paradigm. Remember that. Whether it's the society, you know, we're all part of this society. We all went to the same schools and got the same learnings and teachings. And our families are part of that programming too. And so one of the main things that we each have to do is to rid ourselves of the old programming that's in our minds, our hearts, and our souls that teaches us that fear is something that we better pay attention to all the time, that tells us that each of us is separate from one another and everything is separate from one another. And even though there are major religions, they really don't teach you in a certain kind of way about the meaning that there is in our everyday lives and the sacredness that this earth has and that our human family has. And it really doesn't teach you much about your soul except that it goes somewhere after you die. There's not much teaching about being in touch with your soul and your soul patterns and what your soul is guiding you to do in your lifetime. And so part of this transformation that we each need to do and go through is to get more in touch with our deeper soul, more in touch with that voice inside of ourselves that teaches us to be authentically ourselves and not have to try to fit in to a society or to a family that says, this is the role that we want you to have. This is how we want you to be. And this is, you have to get a job just to make money. And that there is no real meaning that you can search for in your work, in your relationships, in your life. It's just kind of chance or random or failure on your part or failure on someone else's part. But to get back into the depth of our souls and to realize that there's a voice in there that helps to guide us, and that that voice is a voice that knows that everything in the universe and everything in our world on the deepest of levels is connected. And we need to get back to those connections because those connections will guide us, each one of us in our lives. Those connections will let us know that you can see symbols and synchronicities and meaning to things, and that those messages will tell you where to go and what to do in your life. And your life doesn't have to be driven by the obligations to a culture or to your family structures that takes you away from the basic authenticity that's in your heart and in your soul. So there's a lot of work with that we each have to do. And when there's a crisis in the world or a crisis in our lives, instead of seeing it from a doom and gloom kind of place, it's better to see it as what are the messages from the universe that we're getting? And what kind of changes can we make that will help us to move more into the consciousness of the Aquarian age. Move into the consciousness of all of us are one. We're all united as the same family. And when these crises come up in our world, the best thing to do is to go deeper, or find healers, or do anything that's going to help you to feel this connection that you have both to yourself and to the greater universe. So this is going to be an important year with this Uranus square Pluto. And remember that we're, in my estimation, in the last 7 years, 7.5 years or so, before we move into the Aquarian age. So we each have a lot of work, and there's going to be a lot of events that happen in the greater world that are going to help us to make the shift. Remember, again, it's not about fear. It's about looking for the messages as to what you need to do in your life in order to grow, in order to get better, in order to evolve, because that's what this is about. It's about evolution of our souls. And so if you lose a job, let's say, or you have a relationship that goes sour, instead of seeing it as, oh my God, I really messed up, or oh my God, she really messed up, or oh my God, it's such bad luck that I have, all these things are not going to take you into a meaningful, sacred place. To see it as, this was not meant to last any longer. The seasons of my life are changing. The relationship, the job, it's time to let it go. There's some lessons I need to learn. Maybe there's some things I did wrong that I can, right the next time around. But it's all meaningful. It's all happening for a reason. And it's a changing of a season from one season to the next in my life. That's the important thing to get with any events that happen into your life. So again, this is a very important year that we're going to have, and I'm going to be doing these presentations every so often now as we go into different parts of this year to help us all to get a bigger picture for what's happening in our lives. So thank you very much.